Jehoiakim, king of Judah, and the princes of Judah, with the carpenters and smiths from Jerusalem, and had brought them to Babylon. One basket had very good figs, even like the figs that are first ripe, and the other basket had very naughty figs, which could not be eaten, they were so bad. Then said the Lord unto me, What seest thou, Jeremiah? And I said, Figs, the good figs, very good, and the evil, very evil, that cannot be eaten, they are so evil. Again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, like these good figs, so will I acknowledge them that are carried away captive of Judah, whom I have sent out of this place into the land of the Chaldeans, and for their good. For I will set mine eyes upon them for good, and I will bring them again to this land, and I will build them, and not pull them down, and I will plant them, and not pluck them up. And I will give them an heart to know me, that I am the Lord, and they shall be my people, and I will be their God. For they shall return unto me with their whole heart. And as the evil figs, which cannot be eaten, they are so evil. Surely thus saith the Lord, so will I give Zedekiah the king of Judah and his princes, and the residue of Jerusalem that remain in this land, and them that dwell in the land of Egypt. And I will deliver them to be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth for their hurt, to be a reproach and a proverb, a taunt and a curse, in all places whither I shall drive them. And I will send the sword, the famine, and the pestilence among them, till they be consumed from off of the land that I gave unto them and to their fathers. Here ends the second reading. And the third reading from the Gospel according to St. Luke, the 13th chapter, and beginning in the 5th verse. This reading we hear Jesus' parable about a fruitless fig tree. Except ye repent, ye shall all likewise perish. He spake also this parable. A certain man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came and sought fruit thereon, and found none. Then said he unto the dresser of his vineyard, Behold, these 3 years I come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and find none. Cut it down. Why cumbereth it the ground? He answering said unto him, Lord, let it alone this year also, till I shall dig about it and dung it. And if it bear fruit, well, and if not, then after that thou shalt cut it down. Here end the readings. Well, so far in our series, we have heard about the trees in the midst of the garden, in particular, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And then we learned about palm trees and how they are symbols of rejoicing for God's people, and olive trees last week, and how they're symbols of peace and healing for God's people. And today we're talking about the fig tree. Fig tree. After these garden trees, you may have noticed, as you were listening to the readings, that the first tree mentioned by name after those trees in the midst of the garden was the fig tree. The fig tree. And that's because in Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, Adam and Eve, after eating the fruit, realized that they need to cover themselves. And they use fig leaves to make that covering. Now, tradition makes that tree of the knowledge of good and evil out to be an apple tree, right? That's very common in medieval tradition, especially, that it's an apple tree. But figs, interestingly enough, are the first fruit mentioned. immediately following the fall into sin. And it makes me wonder if maybe the fruit that they ate was a fig. There are many, many varieties of fig, or ficus as the technical name is, all throughout the world, between 600 and 800 different varieties, depending on how you count them. And they are in the tropical regions of the world. Way back when I was a student pastor, a vicar, I moved into a little apartment there, and one of the members at the church where I was serving in southern Indiana decided they'd do me the kindness of giving me a plant. And the plant they gave me was a ficus tree, a type of fig. And it was lovely, lovely little tree. I kept it in the house. And then one day, the leaves started falling off. And it wasn't very many days before all of the leaves were off the tree. And I thought, what have I done? What have I done to this poor tree? Have I watered it too much? Maybe I watered it too much. And I got disgusted, and I said, I guess I'm no good with houseplants. And I put it out on the back deck, and I left to go visit my parents in New York. And I came back, and I stepped out on that deck, and you know what that tree was doing? Shoots everywhere! Shoots all over that tree, and it sprouted back. Sometimes the best thing to do for a plant is nothing, isn't it? But that ficus tree that I thought I had killed sprang back to life. And to this day, I wonder whether it was simply doing its thing or if I had done something wrong with it. They're a bit of a mysterious tree in this respect. I'll mention a little more about that in a moment. There are two types of fig trees described in the Bible. The common fig tree, which grows about 30 feet high and bears the most figs that they like for harvesting. And then there's the sycamore fig tree, which gets much, much larger. And in fact, there's a fine example of this kind of fig tree near Jericho in Israel today. And if you go over there, the tour guides will tell you that this is the very sycamore fig tree that Zacchaeus climbed up in order to see Jesus as he was passing by. You know the little story about Zacchaeus, the wee little man. And in fact, that tree is over 2,000 years old. It's possible that tree was big enough for Zacchaeus to climb back in the day. Fig trees bear fruit in different seasons, different times of the year. They don't just have one crop, they bear at least two. And there's an early season, which tends to be in the springtime of the year, and then there's a late season, which tends to be toward the end of summer. And a number of times this practice of the fig tree and its bearing is mentioned in the scriptures. Fig trees have also come to symbolize for us in Western culture a certain measure of embarrassment and modesty. And that's because of what happens with Adam and Eve covering themselves with the fig leaves in the Garden of Eden. In 1504, the great Renaissance artist Leonardo da Vinci finished his incredible statue of David. David as a young man having defeated Goliath. And they took it out and they put this great statue, I think it's about 15 feet or 15 meters tall, it's huge. They put this in a square there in Florence, and the people were going to flock to see it. But when the elders of the community saw this work for the first time, they wanted to make an adjustment to the David. And they had somebody fashion for them leaves, copper leaves shaped like fig leaves. And they put a little belt around David's waist to cover him up, because when Da Vinci carved it, he didn't put any covering at all. on David. And it stayed that way, covered up for about 50 years until the Renaissance ideals of culture caught up and they took that off. To this day, we argue, don't we, about what's appropriate when it comes to depicting human form. And I think probably till Jesus comes back, people will be arguing about what's appropriate in that regard. But there, we talk about putting a fig leaf on somebody, and this is the kind of thing that we have in mind as we think about those fig trees. Well, in the Bible, the fig tree is associated with judgment, with God's judgment. And we see this starting already in Genesis chapter 3, don't we? Where Adam and Eve are afraid of God's judgment. They realize that they are uncovered, and they seek to cover themselves. And this association of the fig trees with judgment might be because of a peculiar habit the tree has. If it doesn't have just the right water and nutrients, or if the figs that are on the tree are not getting pollinated correctly, the tree will suddenly drop its leaves or drop all of its fruit. Just suddenly do this. And there's a famous statement of Jesus about this habit of the tree and judgment on the tree. And this might be one of the reasons that in the Bible it's associated with judgments. It's as though it was suddenly blighted when the leaves or the figs drop off, as they do. Jeremiah continues this theme of judgment about the figs as as God shows him a vision of good figs and bad figs, and how they must be distinguished from one another. We're kind of uncomfortable with the idea of judging, aren't we? We say, don't judge me. It's a common thing that people like to say. And yet, judgment is a necessary thing, isn't it? We have to be discerning people. You wouldn't want to put a bad fig in your mouth, I'm sure. So judgment is necessary. But in Jeremiah, these figs are brought and placed before the temple, and it makes us wonder, is this an offering, maybe the first fruits being offering before God? It's not quite clear why those figs are there until the Lord shows Jeremiah what they symbolize. The good figs symbolize the people of Jerusalem who have been taken away into exile. The king and the princes and the artisans taken away, and these people have been humbled. And in their humility, they repent of their sins and call upon God. These are the good figs. Rotten figs, in contrast, are the people that are still in power there in Jerusalem. They've been put into power by the Babylonian rulers. They will not repent. They will not heed God and his ways. And they are so rotten that Jeremiah describes them as being evil. Evil. No humility at all. He warns them that judgment is going to suddenly fall upon them, like that fig tree dropping its fruit or dropping its leaves. So figs came to represent the people in the Bible who thought they were wise and could get away with things before God, but who in turn would face God's judgment. Adam and Eve, right? They thought they knew what they were doing and fell into the judgment of God. Those leaders in Jerusalem in Jeremiah's day, they thought they were in control. They thought they were the right people. And the judgment of God fell upon them. And then in the last reading we had Jesus' parable of the fruitless tree, right? Falling under judgment. And then, dear folks, from these three examples, the word speaks to you and to me. Are we thinking we can get away with things before God? Are we thinking we're just fine when in fact we're in rebellion against our Maker? Are we thinking God doesn't care about the fruit I'm bearing in my life? He's not really paying so much attention to me. But folks, as all of these examples of the fig remind us, God cares and God judges. We are right to fear God's judgment. And yet, learn this lesson from the fig tree. Think about Adam and Eve, all dressed up in their fig leaves, those scratchy leaves. Some of the commentators were commenting on why on earth did they choose those leaves. They're very uncomfortable. They're not a very comfortable thing to put on, and yet Adam and Eve there in desperation, hiding themselves. And God comes to them, and he provides to them soft and soothing skins of animals to comfort them. And indeed, these may be the very first sacrifices offered to cover the sins of Adam and Eve. In Jeremiah's day, the people are taken away in the judgment. The people of Judah are disobeying God, and they're taken away by the Babylonians. And yet God later delivers them. They're gone for a season of about 70 years, but God returns them to their homeland. And the gospel promised and blessed to those people has been extended to every land and in every tongue. Even those rotten Samaritans, right, that we hear about in the scriptures, who disobeyed the word of the Lord. Even in the gospel reading this past Sunday, we heard how the Lord welcomes them back in the forgiveness